All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Around the Bird Bath, and now the third annual UTSA Baseball Conference Preview episode where we kind of break down the upcoming conference tournament for the Roadrunners, and what better way to do that than bring on Jared and Adrian. Boys, how we doing tonight?
Doing great, Dan. Thanks for having us. It's like I told you before we start recording, it's your show, So we're just here along for the ride, and excited to spend a little bit of time reflecting on the best regular season I think in UTSA baseball history. I guess fair to say that now at this point, and also look ahead to this conference tournament and get excited for what should be a pretty lengthy postseason. We're hoping for the Roadrunners.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. One game at a time. It's one game at a time. But doing excellent, Dan. Feeling very, very anxious on the eve of this conference tournament run. And dude, I mean, it's just what we've been conditioned to. I mean, look, it's one game at a time. That's the way baseball works. But we're not here to be pessimists. I mean, we are excited. We're pumped up for the Roadrunners. They had a fantastic regular season, filled with all the accolades, filled with all the superlatives. But now is when it counts. Now is when it matters in the AAC tournament. We're back in Clearwater, Florida, back at the Baycare Ballpark, home of the Clearwater Threshers, and we've got to go and redeem ourselves on that field this season. Have to.
Well, and I think what's interesting about this year compared to the last two seasons, because the last two seasons they did fine in conference. They finished runner-up to perennial mid-major power schools, DBU and ECU respectively. Compared to this year, they've kind of been in control the whole time, and they've just looked better and better and better, whereas 23 and 24, they were kind of like, I don't want to say limping into the conference tournament, but guys were beat up. Things just weren't clicking. They were losing games that they shouldn't have been losing. They weren't looking good against the better opponents late in the season. And you kind of went into those tournaments, whether it be at Rice or last year at Clearwater, and you're like, I mean, yeah, the potential's there, but it doesn't really seem like it's all put together. Whereas this year, it's like they won the league title 2 weeks early. They are in some national rankings for top 25, and for several weeks now, they've had the outlets saying they're going to get to a regional. And even if they trip up along the way, they're going to get to a regional. I've got some thoughts on that we'll kind of get to later. I think there's a couple kind of nightmare worst case scenarios that why I would say, like, if you're a fan, if you're listening, don't totally just be like, oh, we're in regionals quite yet. Weird stuff happens selection Sunday or selection Monday. Weird things happen with like stolen bids and all that stuff that we can get into later in the week and so forth. But definitely a lot to be excited about. And, when I was doing my last full count recap, I didn't mean for it to kind of go the direction it did of recapping the entire year. But just the way the season started and how they progressed, it just kind of naturally went that way. I mean, we're talking about a team that 40 wins for the first time ever, did not drop a conference weekend series at all, had 5 conference sweeps, and especially considering they started 1-3, they went 41-8 the rest of the way, and they had 3 games canceled all within that.
It's an incredibly impressive slate. Dan, you talk about the regular season record, but the fact that this team did not drop a single conference series is just, it's completely unprecedented. And then I think what's even more impressive was all of the what ifs, the unknowns that we were looking at in the preseason and early on into the season when we were in out of conference play. There was a lot of things that the team had to figure out construction wise. And I don't think anyone could have foreseen them being this successful by the end of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The thing that's impressed me the most about this team compared to last team, Dan, I thought you made a good point where it felt like they kind of limped into the conference tournament a little bit last year. You could see some of the guys were kind of on fumes. Like, I thought Ruger was just on the mound all the time. And I think he had not his full arm ready for him in the conference tournament. I think with UTSA clinching the conference #1 bid as early as they did, it allowed them to be a little bit more flexible and like putting Orlovsky on the mound. And they were doing that thing where they put him out for an inning and throw him in left field. Pretty weird. But I think they did a good job of kind of keeping the arms fresh. I think they got some help there on the travel schedule of like, playing, some Thursday games and, having some midweek games get canceled. I think it took some stress off the pitching staff. But, and this is more of a season long thing. It's just like this team's ability to fight and claw their way back into games. Like, I think like if you're a pitcher tomorrow, who is Royce the starter tomorrow? Do we know? Braylon?
I think it's gonna be Braylon. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's say Braylon gives up, 2 runs in the first couple of innings. Like, he's not going to be sweating that they're going to lose that game because this team has shown time and time again. It doesn't matter how many runs they're down. They had that epic, 15-7 win against Rice where they did 15 runs unanswered. I think if you're the pitcher, you'd know you've got a really strong offense and defense behind you to support you. And I think that's why I'm a lot more optimistic heading into this conference tournament run than I was last year. I kind of had a bad feeling last year that they weren't going to pull it off. So we'll see where things go, but I'd be pretty surprised if they get bounced early this go round.
The bats in general just seem to be firing on a different pace, a different consistency than they did last year.
Well, and you talk about the bats. There's not like you've got a handful of guys or 2 or 3 guys that are at the top of the stats, and you've got Detlefson, Mason Lytle, James Tausig, who are kind of leading in a lot of those kind of power categories. But it also is different in previous years where it's not all falling on one guy. Like, there was a bit of a lineup, and I can't remember how it was set up at this point or right this moment, but this past weekend when I was watching, and it almost felt like a murderer's row. You had Mason, you had Detlefson, you had Stuckey, you had Cade Miller, Norris McClure, and Tausig all within 5 kind of at bats of each other. And Rice got to a point several innings across the weekend where it's like, you can't pitch around these guys, and you can't just be like, oh, well, we'll walk Detlefson because then you've got, so-and-so coming up who hits 265. It's like, nope, we walk Detlefson. Now we've got Mason Lytle. We walk Mason Lytle. Now we've got James Tausig. And that's the point. Like, you just can never relax on this lineup.
And it's not just the lineup either. It's the depth, right? You got guys that can come off the bench, and something that we have seen, like, I think for the first time under Hallmark, the ability to pinch hit, and a guy is going to come in and get a good rip. I mean, we've seen Gruel come in and have those big at-bats, Nathan Hodge come off the bench, Moresi, Palmer. I remember all those guys come in and, having some really good at-bats, even though they didn't start the game. Then you have a guy like Diego Diaz, right? Like, his numbers aren't crazy impressive, but you have a lot of trust in him to make a smart baseball play when he's at the at the plate, and his ability to get the bunt down and stuff like that. So just a really versatile team, and I think it just really increases the margin of error for UTSA, and like they just have so much talent and so many guys that have been in these situations throughout the season and in seasons past and have shown the ability to deliver in clutch moments.
Well, and I want to touch on the pitching too, because I think that's the other thing that has really made the difference this year is having 3 weekend guys that on any weekend you feel like you can get at least 5, if not 5+ out of all 3 of them. They haven't always all put it together on the same weekend multiple times, but Connor Miles can go 5+. Zach Royce can go 5+ pretty easily. Braylon Owens and Braylon, Braylon's the only guy on the team that's been around since the 2022 conference tournament year. And, I go back and forth for the pitchers, who's had the biggest turnaround, him or Orlovsky. And the only reason I think I would give it to Braylon is because he's come in some really big moments the last few weekends when the bullpen's been thin. He had a really big outing that they really counted on. Came in some midweeks, and you look at some of the games he had last year, and I don't think he handles those same situations last year as he has this year. And I think that's probably been the biggest, maybe underappreciated turnaround on the pitching staff is Braylon Owens.
Good point. I think about Braylon's growth a lot because I was really hard on him, right? He had some really bad outings, and I was critical of him. I forgot that Orlovsky really struggled, his freshman year. I don't have his stats pulled up, but that's a good point. He's had tremendous growth and put into a pretty tough situation at a really young age of like stepping in that stopper role. So Great job from the staff developing those guys, and huge shout out to Braylon for sticking around as long as he has, and this transfer portal era, and being one of those like kind of team culture guys.
So based off of the health of the team here at the end of the season, based off of the consistency that they displayed, we're getting a more of an optimistic feeling headed into this AAC tournament. I mean, Dan, how little do all of the regular season accomplishments matter in comparison to the conference tournament?
I wouldn't say that they don't matter, because the RPI is still the highest that it has been in program history, and that doesn't happen if you don't beat A&M. I know A&M's had the season they've had. That doesn't happen if you don't beat Texas, if you don't just win as many games. And I'll be honest, I just learned this the other day. I should have probably known this, but run rule wins do give you a few more RPI points. So while margin of victory doesn't totally matter, if you get a run rule win, especially a road run rule win, that does help you out. So I think you do have to credit, I think the regular season accolades and getting to 40 wins as a mid-major, winning the league the way they did, that's going to matter, because there's still a little bit of a human factor when you go into that selection room on Sunday afternoon, whatever it is. But the reality is still there that you're not an SEC team, you're not an ACC team, you're not even a Big 12 team where you can go 0-2 and really feel good about, we're still going to be okay.
Yeah,
right.
I think UTSA is in a really, I guess, dangerous situation, because they have the resume of an at-large bid team for sure. When you look at their RPI and their quad 1 wins they have and stuff like that, just the raw statistics and all that. But I don't know if they're going to get the benefit of the doubt, right? Because they haven't done it before. The conference has not been good this year. If they're head-to-head with a Sun Belt school and they have a really similar resume, I think the Sun Belt school is going to get the nod for the at-large, right? So,
yeah,
as they should. But I'm really worried about UTSA thinking, okay, like we're in the mix for this at-large. We don't need to sweat too much, if we get bounced a little bit earlier than expected. I think if they lose the first two and they're out that quick, it's been pretty dicey. But even if they win one and then, bounce out after that, they're still going to be sweating it out. Even though they probably shouldn't be. It's just the reality of the situation.
It's the reality of the weight distribution between regular season and conference tournament. And it just feels that the conference tournament is so much more heavily weighted. Though Dan brings up a great point that the regular season, because of the RPI difficulty, because of how successful it was, yeah, it has more weight than years prior. But I mean, this is a team that was an out away from a conference tournament and got snubbed from a regional bid, just a few years ago. And so like it's just proven itself over and over again that the regular season resume doesn't hold the weight on the scale that tournament does. And it's so critical for this team to have a good tournament run. I mean, look, you don't want to say none of it matters without a good tournament run or without a tournament win. But I mean, look, the parallels between 2025 baseball and women's basketball are pretty eerie at this point, with a Coach of the Year award, a Player of the Year award, and Karen Aston, Jordan Jenkins, Pat Hallmark, Mason Lytle. And then Newcomer of the Year was Nina De Leon Negron in women's basketball. And then we also have a co-Newcomer of the Year in Drew Detlefson. And so this is like it's very, very stark. And then what happened? It was this incredible regular season where women's basketball only lost one conference game the entire year. UTSA baseball has not dropped a single conference series all year. Who did Who did women's basketball get bounced to in the very first game of the conference tournament? Rice. And here we are playing Rice in the very first game of the conference tournament. And
Adrian, you get bounced. You really didn't.
You get bounced quick, and it feels like that's a wrap, right? So like it is what it is. You have to have the show up in the tournament. You got to get out there. You got to win a couple of games. You have to make a deep run. or else you get snubbed. And UTSA has been snubbed too many times for a Roadrunner fan or for the guys in the locker room to feel optimistic. Otherwise, you got to have that tournament run, and that's just history has proven that to us. And so I'm sorry to put that all out there on the table, but it is what it is.
If you want Adrian's address, in the event that he just put that juju out there for UTSA tomorrow morning, that will be in the chat below the transcript, so we can provide. No, but I mean, you make a great point, and I think that kind of is a good segue into kind of my nightmare scenario. Florida Atlantic is on the same side of the top bracket as UTSA. Florida Atlantic is a dangerous team. You know, the UTSA swept that series, but it was a lot closer than a series sweep leads on. It was at home. You know, UTSA was 25-2 at home this year, and Florida Atlantic has an RPI of 57, so not terrible, and they could potentially get 2 games against UTSA. It kind of reminds me of the reverse of Southern Miss in 2022, where UTSA won 2 games against Southern Miss, went into the conference championship final, but those 2 wins against Southern Miss really helped their RPI climb. I don't know what it was going into the tournament. I know it finished at 37 or like 37, 39. So that's kind of the nightmare scenario for UTSA, is if Florida Atlantic bounces them from the tournaments, gets 2 wins over them, and then Florida Atlantic doesn't win and doesn't get that auto bid. Yeah. Now you've got a team, you've almost got the reverse effect. And what does Florida Atlantic have that UTSA doesn't, and especially didn't have in 2022? You've got that media darling of they've been to regionals, they've got a long history. And now you're asking the committee, like, well, who looks better right now? And I mean, it's not like Florida Atlantic's like a 25-25 team. They're 36-19 coming into. So that's probably the better thing for UTSA. You don't want to look ahead to FAU too much, but FAU is going to pitch Trey Beard in game 1 tomorrow morning. So if you do face them on Thursday, if both teams win, you're not facing their ace. But that's kind of when I was looking at it again today and was like trying to think through maybe in a devil's advocate type way. I was like, ooh, I don't like those numbers.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. I hadn't considered that. And there is 0 chances conference is getting 3 bids in. None. Like if FAU bounces UTSA and then Charlotte ends up winning the conference out of the other side of the bracket, we're done. We got no shot. It's safe to say. But that being said, I really like the way the bracket filled out for UTSA. Dan, I don't know if you'd agree or not. You're nodding your head. I guess you agree. I mean, you miss Charlotte, you miss USF, and then you miss ECU. And I know ECU struggled, but they had the talent, they had the pedigree, they had the championship mentality that they could go on a run, right? So to get Rice, who I have their record pulled up, they're 17-38 on the year. Weird season, I know. And then FAU and Tulane, I think 5 wins or 6 wins over those 2 teams. You're in a really good spot, I think. I like the way it rolled out for UTSA.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what also is important, you mentioned the 3 bids. Everyone except for UTSA is tournament or bust for the most part. I mean, there's that FAU situation that a lot has to fall into place for that to happen. And what that means is I believe just about everyone's pitching their ace tomorrow. Gillespie's going for Charlotte. Trey Beard is going for FAU. I imagine Norby's going for ECU. Braun is going to go for South Florida. Braylon has kind of been the better weekend guy as of late, the more consistent. So he's kind of our ace too. But where UTSA has struggled a little bit is with everybody's aces, and then Hickson's going for Rice. So the good and the bad is like, okay, you're going to have Rice's best guy tomorrow, and he has the length to do a complete game shutout if things are rolling. But then you go into Thursday, and now everyone's used their ace. The other thing that I thought about as you were talking about the bracket, Tulane, the last 2 tournament champions under Jay Ullman, 2023 and 2024, went in and won the American Athletic and took the auto bid that way. So UTSA, while they've got a good bracket setup with how they've faced those teams earlier in the year, you've kind of got two teams on the top half of your bracket that have shown some tournament magic at different times.
The other part of it is one's got a hit on UTSA, right? I mean, that's the team that everybody wants to beat. You know, the target on your back, so to speak, right? And again, this was the case with women's basketball. You win that regular season title, get to hoist that trophy, get to cut down nets in the combo, but you had so much dominance throughout the year. You know, everybody wants to give UTSA their best punch. I think the Roadrunners are fully aware of that, and I think that's something that they embrace, and it's something that makes this team feels to have a chip on their shoulder, a style about them, just a really, really high level of confidence that I like. But that's the other thing. You know, you're going to get the best of every single team that you play. No one's laying down for UTSA. Everybody wants to be the one to deliver that L in the tournament.
I agree with you, but they've had that treatment for months now too, so I think they'll be well adjusted.
Yeah, and I think they kind of, you know, you look at Thursday's game against Rice, and we can kind of talk about the weekend series a little bit since that's who they're playing tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, early tomorrow afternoon. I mean, they did not look good Thursday night. Like, they looked like they were kind of walking through it a little bit. Their timing at the plate was really off against Rice's arm that they threw. Now, I think some of that has to do with, like, if you're preparing for Hickson all week and then all of a sudden 2 hours, because they made that shift so late, or that switch so late, even the scouts that were at the bird bath, like, weren't aware. They're like, yeah, we just found out an hour ago that they're not throwing Hickson, but we're already halfway here, so we're coming anyway, whatever. But, you know, it wasn't until like the fourth or fifth inning where Hallmark gave a very Hallmark-esque mound visit that kind of turned things around. Mm-hmm. And Mason Lytle, Diego Diaz have a 8-5-3 double play. The Rice player leaves too early, and that turns the game around. But they kind of got that bad game out of their system. They're like, okay, like, we can't just walk through this. We can't sleep through this. And the hitting wasn't the best at ECU, which it sounds funny to say you take two from ECU at the Jungle and the hitting wasn't great, but there was just like a lot of soft contact and a lot of just not like good at bats. And they really flipped that around against Rice. I mean, they won 15-7, 11-4, 7-0. So I think they're kind of cleansing things at the right time.
And I think there was a little bit of rust. Like you say, you know, we started slow, a little rust. You had to travel to the Jungle. You had a double header on Saturday. And, like, you don't have that Tuesday game, so there's a little bit more of a lull there during the week. And like you said, and then Hallmark makes that mound visit, tears some heads up, and then all of a sudden Roadrunners wake up whenever they're down 7-0. But it's a team that has shown time and time again, back against the wall is not a stressful situation for them.
So, Dan, you know, talking a little bit more about Rice, I think one thing that's really important for us to hit on is, UTSA swept Rice, and, you know, Thursday was a little rough, but, you know, they handled it for the most part. But UTSA did not see Rice as ace, right? So tell us a little bit about, I think Hickson is his name, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the most interesting thing about Hickson, and, you know, Matthew Bartlett and I talked a lot about this on the preview with him going into the series. I mean, he's their ace. He was second team all conference. He hasn't had like a great season, like from start to finish. Like, he hasn't been like Gillespie. He hasn't been like Braun or Trey Beard. He's kind of come on as of late. And a lot of that has been since Coach Pierce got on campus and took over. And so I think he's kind of putting things together at the right time. He's got a very high strikeout to walk ratio, and that's something we've seen UTSA struggle with at times. You know, they've been very aggressive at the plate sometimes, and sometimes their two-strike approach is really good, and sometimes their two-strike approach is like, you know, it seems like they're almost sitting on something else. And so I think it's one of those things where at the end of the day, you're talking about one game. You're not talking about a series. And I think that's where UTSA has struggled in previous tournaments, is they maybe drop a series, but it's like, well, if you have that one bad game in the tournament, it means something completely different. And Hickson is somebody that can really just put it together, and almost reminds me a little bit like when they played Middle Tennessee State 2 years ago at Rice. They faced a guy that they had already lit up pretty good. He has an incredible outing, and Middle Tennessee beats them 5-1 in game one of the tournament. and kind of just completely takes the wind out of their sails. So I think for Hickson, the nice thing when you face someone who throws a lot of strikes is there's a good amount of pitches that are going to be in the strike zone, but you got to have a good 2-strike approach, and you can't be intimidated when you're up there. You got to tell yourself that you can win the at bat and just get to him. And that's going to be the thing, is getting him out early, not letting him get to the 6th and 7th inning, because they've got a pretty solid reliever that they could bring in, because whoever wins that first game, they get a much needed off day on Wednesday. So I think Rice is going to, would not be surprised if they have it in their minds, hey, we want 7 or 8 out of Hickson, and then we want 1 or 2 out of Ben Shoshan.
Yeah, that's probably something important to point out. The bracket format is the winner gets a day of rest and the loser doesn't, right? So it sounds super obvious and common sense to say that this opening game against Rice is really important, but it truly is, because even if you win this game and then you lose your next game in the winner side of the bracket, you still got that extra day of rest, right? So if you're like UTSA and you have a guy like Orlowski, that allows you to pitch him in 2 games in 3 days and get a little bit of rest there. Whereas if you're coming out of the loser bracket, it's going to be a lot harder to throw him 3 games in a row on 3 days.
Control your destiny, right? Be in the winner's bracket, get the day off. It's absolutely important.
Yeah, and I mean, you just want to feel good. I think, even if somehow, like, I think at this point, all the guys are, it's pretty obvious that they've got bigger aspirations than 40 wins. They've got bigger aspirations than a regular season title. That's obviously important. You could see the emotion on Saturday and all the hype reels Saturday afternoon after the series sweep, how much that meant to them and the coaching staff and the guys that have been here for 3 or 4 years. But they play hard baseball and they love the game, so they've got bigger aspirations. So you want to feel good going into hopefully a regional tournament, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but winning the tournament gives them a better seed. Winning the tournament, they're probably a pretty tough 2 seed. If they lose the tournament and fall in kind of walking backwards, now they're going to be a 3 seed at probably a really tough 2 seed and a really tough 1 seed. So that changes it too. But again, I mean, they've just shown all season that they're just not going to give up, and they're going to battle and they're going to fight, and you're going to have to earn every single out that you get against them.
A Rice or an FAU is also firing on all cylinders. Who's that guy that can really be, the unsung difference maker, the playmaker, the spark, if you will, that can really win that game, that hard fought all the way down into extra innings? Who could be that guy that if he has a breakout performance can really put this team over?
So I'm going to combine one answer just because it's fun. The Hodge brothers, I think, getting their glove is so good. When they play second and short, I mean, some of the plays that I've seen Ty Hodge make this year at shortstop, just incredible range and just his control over his body on some of those throws, and just his awareness of where he is in the field and what he needs to do with those throws to get there that in time, because that can be big, because maybe it keeps the ball in the infield and prevents a runner from second scoring, and then gets the runner at third or gets the runner at first, and now you've got a few outs, 2 outs instead of just 1 out and a run in. I think somebody else, since you mentioned all the big names, I mean, you got to look to the freshmen. You got to look to Jordan Ballin and Caden Miller, and they're poised at the plate. And I mean, I still think about Caden Miller's pinch hit grand slam against USF that just completely turned that game upside down. And what he can do as a freshman, and what he puts on himself for the games he wants to have. He's somebody that can, send one to the wall for a double. He doesn't have to hit a home run every single time.
Yeah, when you look at the conference tournament format, it's pretty likely that UTSA is going to have to rely on some arms that you don't feel super comfortable with, right? Not your Orlowskis, not your Connor Kellys, not your Zach Royce, but I really like the way that James Hubbard threw the ball in the last game against Rice, right? So if we have to pick someone in the pitching staff who's going to come in, game 3, game 4 of this tournament and throw 2-3 really good innings of relief. I feel good about James Hubbard based on what I saw this past weekend.
Yeah, I mean, Hubbard was solid, and Hubbard, I mean, he started the season as kind of the Tuesday guy. And I don't know, I don't want to put anything out there because I don't know anything official. And it's so hard to know in college baseball if guys are injured, if guys are just, not feeling 100%, if they're having a hard time throwing strikes all of a sudden. So who knows exactly why that spot kind of switched to like Gunnar Brown and some other guys. And then, of course, you had the Tuesday games getting canceled, so that didn't help either. But yeah, I mean, I knew he was doing well. I didn't even realize how well he was doing until I looked at the stat line. I was like, oh man, like he hasn't given him a hit through 4 innings yet. And, I think a couple other guys that just really did well on Saturday, Kendall Dove and Christian Elkerholm. And those are 2 other guys that hadn't really got a lot of time this season. They've had some moments. They've had some good outings. They've had some bad outings. They've been used in low leverage. They've been kind of forced to be used in high leverage at times. And I think the bullpen looks solid. And what better confidence to have going into the first game, knowing that you just did really well against the team that you're playing. It's not like they're like, oh, well, we did well against UAB and they didn't make the tournament. Like we shut down the team that we're playing and kind of dominated them that final day of the series.
Dan, something that we failed to mention earlier, the whole discussion point about beating the same team 4 times in a row. Pretty tough. Is that something that you're concerned about?
I'm only concerned about it because Hickson's throwing, and they didn't see Hickson on Thursday.
Yeah, same.
I heard mixed things about why he didn't throw. I heard some people say they were saving him for Tuesday. I heard some people say that he wasn't feeling 100%. At any rate, he didn't throw. And he's got the ability, not to just be a broken record, but he's got the ability for the complete game shutout. I mean, he did that against Charlotte and beat Gillespie. And that's probably the biggest thing, because if he really shuts him down into the 6th inning, you've only got so many innings to play with. I mean, UTSA has shown they can put up a lot of runs quickly, but it's all going to depend on how quick they get to Hickson. But outside of that, I'm not worried about it just because I think they're just such a better team than Rice.
Yeah.
But
the pitching staff that I saw in the weekend series, I'm not worried about beating for the 4th time, but having a really solid, Friday starter come in that we didn't see previously is definitely cause for concern.
Well, and it was an interesting series too, because although UTSA already had the number 1 seed locked up and everything, they were playing those games to win because how much losing those games would have hurt their RPI.
Yeah.
So Rice was in Thursday night when UAB lost. Even though Rice didn't win a game, they made it in. And they knew on day 1 they were in. So games 2 and 3, they didn't have to win them, and winning them wasn't going to help their RPI. Like, I mean, what's it going to do? Bump it from 220 to 205? Whereas UTSA was the team that's like, hey, we need to win these games because we need to keep our RPI at 21, 22. And so it was kind of an interesting series in that regard. But again, if they can get to Hickson quick and just, and they've done that. I mean, they got to Braun eventually. They got to Beard eventually. They've gotten to the aces. They got to Norby eventually. The only ace they didn't really get to was Gillespie. He's on the opposite side of the bracket. So as long as they can get to Hickson the way they've gotten the other aces, they could be rocking and rolling pretty well tomorrow afternoon.
Jared, going back to April of 2024, UTSA actually has beat Rice 4 times in a row. This would be the 5th consecutive win over the Rice Owls, the longest in program history, with a win tomorrow over Rice. So it would actually have to be, you would actually be beating Rice baseball 5 times in a row. 5 times. Yeah. It's a tall task. Absolutely so. But pretty cool little tidbit stat there from Go UTSA. Dan, I wanted to ask you, whenever I was talking about unsung heroes, how about Norris McClure? With I think 19 games with a hit so far, just unbelievable consistency from the grad transfer. There's an unsung guy who I think has been a real difference maker for this team this year, and could very well prove to be in a conference tournament run.
Yeah, and something that's interesting about Norris, and this is kind of a little bit of a caveat into just how UTSA cleaned up today on the accolades. I mean, Coach of the Year unanimous, Player of the Year, Position Player of the Year unanimous, or Player of the Year, excuse me, and then Newcomer of the Year, Drew Detlefson, Orlowski first team, 4 other first teams, 3 second teams, 3 freshmen. Norris was the only one that's kind of would be considered maybe your regular starting 9 who didn't receive anything. And I think that's just because he had a little bit of a slower start, and being over at third base and first base, he kind of splits a lot of time with like Nate Hodge, Caden Miller, Garrett Gruel in the DH. And so, but what I like about Norris is, and you'll hear Coach Hallmark talk about this every time he comes up, is just his athleticism. I mean, he may have a faster first to home than Diego Diaz. Like, he's a little taller, he's a little bigger. You know, Diego's like really low to the ground. Norris can really move, and like if I see Norris or Diego on first, I'm like anything to the gap, and they're scoring to home. You know, the 2 things I'd say about Norris, and I'm not trying to make this an individual critique because I know that's not what the point of the question was. He gets a little shaky over at third base sometimes. I think he's almost like sometimes he's so twitchy that it kind of hurts him sometimes. Like he rushes his throws a little bit and makes some errors. And then at the plate, it almost seems like sometimes he's trying to do a little too much and takes like a real big cut and just doesn't see the ball well. Now, he makes up for more often than not. So like it's not something I'm worried about. It's more just something I'd watch. And then the other thing I'd pay attention to with Norris is there was some controversy on Saturday. Rice got caught in a rundown, and the runner, whether or not it was on purpose or not, the runner, it was actually Rank, Rice's left fielder, kind of like stuck his knee up a little bit and clipped Norris. You know, initially it looked like maybe a knee. I don't know exactly what it is. The good thing is it sounds like it's not going to be anything too serious, but I would keep an eye on that. Lower leg injuries are things that can kind of flare up at weird times. And it gets hot down there. It gets humid. All of a sudden you start cramping bad and you just can't move the same. So, you know, again, UTSA has the depth. But, yeah, I mean, Norris is somebody that just plays the game hard and has that gritty chip on his shoulder. I think, I mean, a D2 coming up, a D2 guy coming up into D1, looking to show himself. So
on the injury
good point on his speed is 8 stolen bases are actually tied for second most on the team this season.
Would not have guessed that. On the injury front, it seems like UTSA is pretty lucky as far as like having, you know, pretty much full roster ready to go. You mentioned the kind of nick up with Norris McClure. I think one of the other infielders also had a small injury. I can't remember if it was Diaz or Ballin.
Yeah, Ballin didn't play on Saturday. He had a brace on his wrist. It doesn't sound like it's anything, you know, too critical. I think it's just kind of like, hey, let's rest you, let's treatment it. I think he'll be good to go. I don't think any of the guys that are a little banged up, I don't think it's anything that is going to hold them out. And I think the depth is there in a sense to where if there was anything more, it's not, I'll say this, it's not last year where in game 1 of the tournament, Mason Lytle hurt his hamstring, was basically unavailable for game 2. I think it's just at this point, everyone's probably a little beat up. Everything hurts. You know, you got Nixon, you know, they wear those shin guards on their legs, and it seems like the fall balls always miss the shin guard and stuff. So I think it's just, I don't think there's anybody who's like, oh, they're not going to play because, you know, outside of Ty Odom, who unfortunately we haven't seen all season because of the knee injury. I don't think you have anything like that.
So Dan, I mean, I hope it matters. Maybe it's bad juju to ask about it, but I did want to ask about the other side of the bracket. I mean, regardless of what happens with UTSA, who's your pick coming out of that side?
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny that, you know, we talk about playing the same team. East Carolina as the 6th seed is going to play South Florida in you know, their first game, game 4, the last game of tomorrow. And I like South Florida just because, you know, they've got the pitching and I think they've kind of got the offense. You know, that's another series where UTSA swept, and that was the series that it essentially gave them the league title. but those games were a lot closer than a series sweep. I mean, UTSA had to come from behind in every one of those games. So I think I'm picking whoever comes out of the top. I think I'm picking South Florida is going to be waiting in the wings on Championship Sunday. And to their credit, probably a better overperformance than UTSA, because South Florida was picked to finish last in the conference this season, and they got the 3 seed coming into the tournament. So,
yeah, I'm looking at the bracket too, and I was kind of counting the days, and if Charlotte makes it to the championship, Gillespie could go again. I think on 4 days rest.
Yep.
Yeah, something to watch.
And that's with the days off. That's kind of why. That's the other reason why everyone kind of throws their ace game 1, not just because you want that first day off, but for most guys, if you throw them on Tuesday, they could be available for you again on Sunday.
Yeah, at least like in a bullpen spot, throw a couple of innings or something. Yeah.
Yep. South Florida's very good. They're very scary to me. They're scarier than an FAU, and not just standings wise, but just from watching them. They're also semi in their home turf, greater Tampa area.
They passed the eyeball test. I can say that much. I mean, when I was watching those streams, I'm like, this looks like a different level of athlete than a lot of other teams in the conference.
Tough team. Tough team.
Yeah, and something to keep in mind for the tournament, it is double elimination. So, like, Adrian, you put that juju out there about the basketball team comparison. You do get 2 losses, so that helps a little bit.
Yep.
Championship Sunday, though, even if the team you're facing has already lost, it doesn't matter. It's just one game, winner take all for Championship Sunday. They got to finish because Selection Monday's on, the next day. And then something else that's kind of interesting. Only since the AAC started in 2014, only 2 times has the regular season champion won the tournament, and both of those years that was ECU. I think 2015 and 2022. So better odds that now some of that's because all those years ECU was in such a good spot for an at-large that I mean they were more in a hosting conversation. We won't talk about that on this podcast with UTSA, but that is something that could be in mind. It's just such a long tournament, and it's such an interesting place to play. The ball flies really well, which helps UTSA, but traditionally it hasn't really been a multi-big league as of late. So I would keep that kind of stat in the back of your mind.
Crucially, too, the regular season champ does not get a bye. I mean, yeah, you get the potential benefit of playing the lowest seed, but baseball's a funny game, and you look at a team like Rice, and like they had a coaching change mid-season, right? So if you look at the aggregate of their season, like they're the 8th seed, but if you were to just look at like the second half of the season, they'd probably be a much higher seed. So I really don't like the format that the AAC puts together. It's kind of like sour grapes to be complaining about it when it hasn't even started yet. But I would have liked to see UTSA at least get like one game of bye as the 1 seed.
Yeah, we're gonna change Jared's name in the episode to ECU head coach Cliff Godwin.
Oh, that was his thing for a while. Yeah,
which it's a fair point.
It is,
and and it's funny because I got familiar with the Southland this year, doing some games for SFA, and I really liked their format. They essentially set up their own conference regional and their own conference super. So this past weekend, they finished a weekend before everyone else. This past weekend, they ran 2 4-pod regionals, and now this next weekend, they're going to do a best 2 out of 3. So you get your best pitchers rested. You're not pitching some freshman that's thrown 6 innings on Championship Sunday. But then again, you've got Houston Christian going against New Orleans. I think you've got like the 6th and the 8th seed. So conference tournaments are just wild, and everybody, I was talking to a former player on Saturday. He said, and when he was at UTSA, he spent some time in the Southland. He's like, the Southland just hates each other, and they just want to destroy each other every time they play. And I think you saw that. I mean, unfortunately, the magical season that UTRGV was having, I think it came to an end. Lamar had 40 wins. They went 0-2 barbecue. They're probably done. So, again, not to scare the UTSA listener, but I think UTSA probably needs at least 2 wins to feel really solid. And I would almost say like you need to get to Championship Sunday to feel like, okay, like we're okay.
Yeah,
I know that's a lot of pressure, but
don't book any days off until Championship Sunday.
Yep.
They can lose the championship game and be fine. I feel pretty safe about that, but if they don't get there, it's gonna be dicey. We'll be in a position that UTSA fans have been in all too many times across many different sports of hoping the selection committee will give you the benefit of the doubt when you're a newbie in the world of college athletics, really.
Yeah.
Dan, where's your confidence versus anxiety ratio right now? Your optimism versus fear ratio? Where are we at?
My optimism will feel. Go ahead.
And in comparison to last season, let's say too.
Last season, I was much more worried than I let on. I was trying to be like hopelessly optimistic when I was like, oh yeah, they'll be fine. And Jared's like, they're gonna go with 2 barbecue.
I don't know if I specifically said that. I was down with that team all last year though.
Yeah,
and I was wrong this year because I was down on this team as well. And they way surpassed, obviously.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this. Again, so the one thing that can put in my mind that this is the best team that UTSA has ever had for baseball is if they make a regional, because the other thing that maybe a lot of people don't realize, outside of 2022 when they went to Championship Sunday, Coach Hallmark has never won a tournament game. 2021, 2023, and 2024, his teams went 0-2 barbecue. So where that is in his mind Monday night at 10 o'clock in Tampa Bay, Florida, I don't know. But that's our job, right? To bring that out there and put that in the universe as supporters, as guys who do podcasting. But to answer you the question, Adrian, my optimism will be a lot better tomorrow afternoon if we're talking about a victory over Rice than Hickson throwing a complete game shutout and upsetting UTSA. So if they get past Rice, I'll be feeling pretty good. Just because FAU's not going to have Beard, they're going to get the day off. They're going to get that rust off, get the win. So
Hallmark's postseason woes has been a massive elephant in the room, monkey on his back. Yeah, how critical is it for that guy to have some postseason success? Because it's starting to trend, right? It's starting to trend that Hallmark is, you don't want to say
that's why he's still postseason. Why he's still a UTSA. Let's be honest. If he went on those tournament runs past couple of years, he's probably at an SEC school or a Big 12 school. So. Blessing and a curse, I guess.
I mean, anyone who listens to a few episodes of Around the Bird Bath knows I'm a huge Hallmark supporter. I mean, just what he's done the last few years. I mean, I put this tweet out, I think, last night, and I was having a hard time wording it correctly with just the limited characters of Twitter. But you look at all of the records, team records for UTSA, and you look at when they were set, and then you look at the few times that they were matched, and they were matched by a Coach Hallmark team. And so I want the success for him just so everyone will finally be like, yes, like he has proven himself. He can do it. Like it almost kind of brings that, it solidifies what a lot of the diehard Hallmark supporters have felt the whole time. And then you're just finally, and he's a competitor. I mean, Jared, I remember you asked back in February, when we were doing our preview, it was like, oh, do you take any of these Tuesday games off? And I don't think he knows how to do that. There will be some games. Yeah. I mean, there will be some games where he can be like, okay, I'm not going to burn Orlowski when we're down by 5, or I'm not going to bring in Robert Orlowski when DBU's beating us 14-2. But I don't think he knows how to lose. And I think that helps more often than it doesn't.
Dan, you're always subtly trying to get us to expense a Twitter account upgrade for you. You're like, oh, I don't have enough characters, or can you upload this video for me? It's too long for my account. I'm on your games, Dan. Dan's trying to get Croc premium on the Audible debit card.
I can't do it because anytime you get into a little bit of a banter, the reply is always like, look at this guy, he pays for Twitter.
Yeah.
So I'll just do more tweets, or I'll just wrestle with it 3 or 4 times till I make it fit and abbreviate different words and have some grammatical errors.
Last thing on me, on my side, sorry. UTSA is still unranked by D1 Baseball. They're the only outlet that has not ranked the Roadrunners.
Yeah.
Do you think that?
But Kendall Rogers loves Coach Hallmark.
Yeah, that's been kind of funny. I'm trying not to give Kendall too much crap because I do like him.
No, I agree. I do too.
Do you think that helps with the whole like chip on the shoulder mentality, right? That there's still the doubters out there, there's still the haters, if you will. Like, do you think that kind of filters into the team's mindset a little bit?
I think so, because I mean, if you're gonna do more than just get to a regional, because I think for UTSA and I think for these guys where they are their careers collegiately as baseball players, they want to get to more. They want to do more than just get to a regional. UTSA has done that. They've never won a regional game. To win a regional game, most likely you're going to have to beat a power opponent, a power conference opponent. And you look at D1 baseball, I mean, yesterday's rankings are a perfect example. Now, I thought only 2 teams were going to drop out. They dropped 4 out. 4 power teams moved in. And it's like, okay, so clearly, and the devil's advocate argument I'd make is like, hey, Kendall, you told us a week ago that you were right there with us in Northeastern. Well, 4 spots are open, and you put 4 of your power conference teams in there. So I think some of it's subjective. You're trying to rank 25 teams out of a sport that has 300 Division I teams. And I mean, I don't want to say this I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but you want to be right at the end of the season. Like when y'all asked me my projections of record at the start of the season, I was like, I don't know, let's say over 35 wins, because you want to be right. I think D1 baseball at the end of the day, they are for whatever reason, they're recognized by NCAA as the ranking. So you want to be right. So what are you going to do? Are you going to put a Kansas or a West Virginia or a UCF in there? Or are you going to put little UTSA that is making some noise every 6 or 7 years? And if they fall out, it's like, oh, see, you guys can't even rank UTSA. So yeah, I think a little bit is just protecting yourself, kind of.
And you just said it yourself, right? We've never been to a super regional. We've never won a game at a regional. Like there is no good reason to give UTSA the benefit of the doubt. And it sucks to admit that as a Roadrunner fan, but it's just the truth. And I really can't hold that against Kendall and his team.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it looks. But to answer your question about the guys being a chip, yeah, I think it is a chip because of like who you would need to be in a regional, and you've still got kind of, for better or worse, who the outlets recognize as the guys of college baseball, saying you're not good enough. And it's like, okay, we'll show you. So I do want to talk about too, as we wrap up, my plans for coverage throughout the week. So. Gonna be difficult to be live tweeting tomorrow. I do have school for another day and a half. I won't confirm or deny if baseball will be on in a small corner of my classroom. That will be up for interpretation. But if you're going to be tracking the tournament all day, definitely keep up with Andrew Rydell. He works with College Baseball CNT. He's going to be covering the Tulane game virtually. So if you want live tweets, stay with his account. As soon as I'm able to kind of watch and be at my phone at the same time, I'll be tracking, following along. And then depending on how things go, I'm trying to make plans and trying to figure out a way to get down to Clearwater this weekend. So I've got some opportunities to do some standby. It is Memorial Day weekend, so we'll see how that goes. But I'm working the logistics that if there's a reason to be down there Friday evening into Saturday and Sunday, then I'm going to be there. So.
And of course, that game, if UTSA does get the championship game, that game is on ESPN News. Which is that going to be the first like legit TV channel that UTSA has been on this year? I think it might have been on Longhorn Network or something. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, would you put ESPN News above like SEC Network Plus? Yeah, because like that's still just streaming.
A cable channel. Yeah, it's a cable channel. Yeah.
So nice
under the lights.
And I do think it is a simulcast, is it? It'll also be available on ESPN Plus as well as ESPN News on that conference championship game, if we get there.
Yep. And so, of course, before we officially sign off, I want to give a big thanks to all of our Patreon supporters who allow us to continue to bring you the best UTSA athletic coverage all season long, all year long. But also a big thanks to our board of trustees, Digiteek, John Outwell, Gary and Rubin, representing the UTSA Bird Gang Tailgate, Ray Redding, Brandon Grell and the Grell Realty Group, Andy Elizade and Proficient Benefit Solutions, Ian McClendon and Secret LLC, Javon Townsend, president of the DFW chapter of the UTSA Alumni Association, Ryan Squires, Waterman Construction, UTSA Annual Giving, Wayne Gonzalez and Runners Rising Project, Brandon Padron, and Runners United, where you can be a part of all the exciting changes with NIL and rev sharing and supporting UTSA student athletes at www.goutsa.co. And of course, our big money donors, Ben Tovar, the Bunch family, Zach Espericueta, the San Antonio Podcast Network, Alejandro Benavides, Jacob Cavazos, board president for the UTSA Alumni Association, John Nally, Rick Cortez of Rowdy Road Grillers, Sumner McDaniel, UTSA King Bowser, Maddie, and Home Field Apparel, where you can use the discount code UTSA Wants Home Field for 15% off your first order. That list is growing longer and longer every time, it seems. It's great. It's awesome.
Yeah, shout out to the Patreon subscribers, and also a special shout out to anyone who may have graduated from UTSA this past weekend. Welcome to the alumni family. 5,000 graduates this year, which is awesome.
Yeah, and also, last but not least, I think I was supposed to throw this in earlier, so if you're still listening at this point, kudos to you. But Adrian, the Los Correcaminos jerseys are going to be live on the website, yes? Are we still doing that?
That's correct. Yes. So if you're watching, Dan is actually wearing it right now. It is the Alamo Audible exclusive Los Correcaminos baseball jersey, with all the fixings, side patches, quote unquote. It's screen printed, but the sleeves are patched up. On the back, we got the jersey number, Birds 69, our founding year. So really, really incredible piece. Dan was able to wear it to the Thursday game against Rice, the big comeback victory, and got a lot of love from UTSA baseball players and fans alike. Not to mention this unprecedented success that UTSA baseball is having does come on the cusp of the entire team getting distributed the Los Correcaminos white flatbill snapback. Coincidence? I think not. So yes, Los Correcaminos has been a fantastic good luck charm for 2025 UTSA baseball. You can get outfitted in Los Correcaminos gear right there at the Alamo Audible fan shop. We are going to run a special sale for the baseball jersey, and I think we'll just extend it to the hats as well. So all Los Correcaminos items you can get through a conference tournament run with the discount code BIRDS69, and we'll save you 15% on it. BIRDS69 at checkout.
All right. Well, that's it for us. Follow us on Twitter. Watch the boys on ESPN Plus, and hopefully we'll be back in a few days talking about a conference tournament championship.
All right, let's get it. Thanks for having us in. Appreciate it.
All right, birds up.